Okay, hello and greetings, fellow Covidians. I'm going to do another rough draft talk here today on religion and the history of early Christianity in relation to late dominant paganism, and then how that carries through to today. Focusing on the issues of core cultural conservatism, fundamentalism, and the radicals who fought to destroy the radical heretics who did not conform, and why crusades and inquisitions are radical, socially, even when based on fundamentalism, which traditional fundamentalists would disagree with. In other words, they would view themselves as not radical because they're trying to return to something that they view as what should have been or what was and should be again, and therefore is not the negative connotation of the word radical. But many view them as radical, mainly because they tend to use violence and martial law, authoritarianism, and they dictate. So, yes, let us enter this wonderful, wild world of Western Christianity. And the tentative title shall be "One Faith to Rule Them All." Okay. I'm incorporating the text as we go, as I evolve this into my novel called The Irish River Bride, which is set around 400 AD in Ireland and deals with the conversion of pagans by the early Christians with St. Patrick, and the cultural relationship to England, which is interesting too. Not just the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, here we go. When the world was mostly pagan, conservative fundamentalist radicals persecuted minor cults like Christians. So, in other words, within the Roman Empire, there were radical sadists who got off on hurting others, and they were allowed to do this in the name of the empire, the state or the government, and also, which was also the state religion, which was unified under the emperor. Then, when Christianity became dominant, they treated all other religions the way that Romans treated rebel cults. Barbarian mercenaries had become Christianized, like the Goths and the Visigoths, but still sacked Rome and killed in the name of the Roman Catholic Church. Although they were Arian, later the Roman Catholic Church became dominant, and you get those early Christian warlords. Due to force dominance, or might is right theory, which was prevalent in patriarchy, this has continued to the present day. Oligarchical conservatives in any culture feed hatred of the other with "we are the best" nationalism or dogma. Even when I was playing on my school soccer team, I felt such a passionate will or desire to win the game, each game that we played, that I would get into a frenzy of, you know, with other players that were passionate also, of it was a sort of fervor where we want to win whatever it takes. Okay, now you try to play within the rules, but a lot of times rules would get bent. Okay, as the physical contact happens. But I digress. It is therefore up to the mainstream, led by radical liberals, to deconstruct the change is bad narrative, or, in other words, the win at all costs narrative is another way to, perhaps another narrative, but in line with that we should never deviate from the concept that we must win, we must have the power, and therefore change that disrupts that power is bad. Rather than a more egalitarian approach, which I think is more democratic and more utopian. But that's what I want to focus on, of course, in most of my work now, going onward. But I do want to go over some of these basics because I think framing the arguments between conservative and liberal is problematic. It has created a lot of problems, and people cannot see outside of the frames that they don't even know exist. So I think, first of all, you have to understand that a certain framework exists within a culture and within the linguistic and social parameters. Okay. So as progress is made between cultures due to marriages, migration, trade, and tourism, there will always be resistance or reaction from the conservative core of the culture, the threshold guardians, that guard the laws, the traditions, the rituals, and the way that I show this is in diagrams, sort of like cells. And as you have cells encounter each other, the core is what defines the cell. But on the perimeters, the cell walls with the masses push against each other and may penetrate, or there might be osmosis that occurs. But there are metaphors to be able to talk about these issues more scientifically with larger and larger frames, more universal or objective framework as much as possible. Okay. The most popular changes tend to become the new cultural norms, social conventions, and even eventually laws. This is why liberals tend to like democracy, to allow that change, that progress to happen, and conservatives prefer oligarchy, to contain, to refrain from change, which would be sinful deviance. Little is known for sure about Jesus and Peter. St. Peter is said to have helped to found the early basilica congregations in Rome, but fires destroyed most evidence and records, if not active participant. How do I want to say this? Activist early Christians who wanted a revisionist history. I'm sure that they destroyed many pagan books and Gnostic books which did not fit their story or the one that they wanted to have told. Unlike most religions in the Roman Empire, Christianity required its adherents to renounce all other gods, a practice adopted from Judaism. This radical "my God is the only one for everyone" syndrome that unifies for hierarchical monopoly is baked into Judaism and Christianity and is dominant rather than more peaceful, such as the pagan New Age unity, which would be some of our gods are so similar we might share the same universe with different names for different aspects. Christian refusal to join pagan celebrations meant they were unable to participate in much of public life, which caused non-Christians, including government authorities, to fear that Christians were angering the gods and thereby threatening the peace and prosperity of the Roman Empire. In addition, the peculiar intimacy of Christian society and its secrecy about its religious practices spawned rumors that Christians were guilty of incest and cannibalism. The resulting persecutions, although usually local and sporadic, were a defining feature of Christian self-understanding and possibly the later self-loathing, which also is prevalent in Judaism, that they are the oppressed people meant to suffer and the world is sinful. Most of the fanatical, dogmatic oligarchy of formal Christianity did not come from Jesus or Peter, but St. Paul, who was not even an original disciple, apostle. They call him an apostle, but I digress. Paul was a Roman Jewish ICE agent, basically, who arrested and persecuted Jewish Christians. Paul later saw the light and now wanted to tell everyone how to be a Christian. And for his radical sedition, became a state criminal and spent years under arrest for civil disobedience, which I would call radical. Mainly, he was trying to Romanize Christians to increase conversions by minimizing Jewish rituals like circumcision. So he disagreed with St. Peter on a lot of those issues. Later, Roman Christianity became more based on Paul than on the more communal aspects of Jesus and his original disciples, which were lost in translation due to the mainstream audience who conformed to the conventions of empire more than helping the poor. A series of more centrally organized persecutions of Christians emerged in the late 3rd century, when emperors decreed that the empire's military, political, and economic crises were caused by angry gods. Sound familiar? Still used by Christians today. And the lineage is clear from Rome. All residents were ordered to give sacrifices or be punished. Jews were exempted as long as they paid the Jewish tax. Estimates of the number of Christians who were executed ranges from a few hundred to 50,000. Many fled or renounced their beliefs. Disagreements over what role, if any, these apostates should have in the church led to the Donatists and Novatian, I don't know how to pronounce that, the Novatianist schisms. Christianity spread throughout the early Roman Empire, despite persecutions due to conflicts with the pagan state religion. Emperor Constantine legalized the practice of Christianity in 313, Edict of Milan, and it became the state religion in 380. Germanic invaders of Roman territory in the 5th and 6th centuries, many of whom had previously adopted Arian Christianity as mercenaries, eventually adopted Catholicism to ally themselves with the papacy and the monasteries. By the time of Constantine, the state of apocalyptic expectation must have worn rather thin. Every year after Christ was to be Armageddon, because it didn't happen the year before, so it was definitely going to happen this year. The imminent coming of Christ, expectation of the last day on this mortal sinful earth, constituted radical social danger. Besides, the spirit of the old Jewish law, so widely separated from new Christian mysticism, including all Gnostic cults, was not so very different from the Roman spirit itself, according to Wheel, with all the Roman sects and cults within the pagan pantheon. Rome could come to terms with the Jewish Christian God, perhaps because it fit with the uncompromising empire model, which was needed to maintain taxation obedience, if not martial law. Thanks for listening, and blessed be.